noise.
That's just here. Hi, everybody. Welcome to our live stream. It's great to be back with you. So today we're going to be talking about understanding, and understanding is the true evangelist. So that's what we're going to be exploring. Is there anything you want to say, Betty?
Well, the word evangelist kind of misleads me. So it means true leadership.
Right. So it's not like you're evangelizing for a cause, like a crusader. That's not what we mean by evangelist.
No,
There's certainly a lot of evangelists, a lot of talk, a lot of that, but that's not what we're talking about here. So what we're talking about here is understanding. When you understand man to be God's self-conscious identity, you will have no temptation to believe that man can be God or become God, good. Man cannot know either God or man as another being if man exists as reflection. So that's one aspect of it. When you live science, you're living a science reflected in your life, in your living, is the true evangelist. Does that make sense, Betty?
Yeah, but the thing that I see in human living, we think that what we study, like we go to college and we become a scientist of some kind, an archaeologist, a doctor, a lawyer, whatever. That kind of living is all based on the appearances that you have around you. When you are working with and living metaphysics, the mental nature of all being, it has a different flavor to it.
Right.
And if you are living the 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 things that come to you out of your understanding of science, that's the evangelist. That's the leadership that comes from being rather than intellectual study.
Right.
And they combine easily enough. You can certainly use everything you've ever learned from the standpoint of your human living. But when you understand who you are fundamentally, is a different flavor to the way you express yourself.
Right. So if the question, what is man, proceeds from the knowledge that being is conscious identity or mind, the answer is embraced in the question. And that's taken from Laird, A Letter to My Students, which is what we're using for the quotes, is the letter to my students written by Margaret Laird, that is available in pamphlet format from the Institute of Metaphysical Science at scientificmetaphysics.org.
And that was written about 1959.
Okay, yeah. So that's what we're referencing. So if you have that pamphlet, you'll be able to look at some of these references. But this knowing man is the God idea or mind as knowledge or understanding, mind being mind, attributing all substance, intelligence, wisdom, being, cause and effect to God, to mind. And that's from Science and Health on page 275. So shall we dive in? Is there anything else you want to say to set this up, or shall we dive right in?
Dive right in.
Okay, here we go. So on page 1 of A Letter to My Students, Margaret Laird wrote, "The knowledge of good unfolds intuitively and inspirationally from the infinite conscious or soul of each conscious human individuality."
You need to read that again. There's a big word in there called unconscious that you read as conscious.
Oh, okay, let me scratch that. The knowledge of good, capital G, unfolds intuitively and inspirationally from the infinite unconscious or soul of each conscious human individuality.
Yep.
So, Anything more you want to add there to sort of unpack that?
Yeah, in a way, but there's a quote here from Alan Watts, and they talking about thousands of people. People want some conscious experience of being at one with reality itself. And that's the big step forward back a few years ago when this was first written. But people had gone along with what they were told, what they were taught traditionally, and so on, handed down over the ages. And people now are more willing, or really anxious in some ways, to have an actual experience, an individual experience of reality.
Right.
And it's available. You just need to recognize it before. So I thought that was a good quote from Alan Watts.
Yep. Okay, and Mary Baker Eddy says in Science and Health on page 501, understanding is the line of demarcation between the real and the unreal. So let's talk about what that means, the real and the unreal. So understanding is the line of demarcation.
Yeah. And the note right under that, you might want to include that because that came from the same quote.
Okay, understanding is not intellectual, is not the result of scholarly attainments, but is the reality of all things brought to light.
Yep.
So when we go back to the quote, understanding is the line of demarcation, that's just living science, consciously acknowledging the truth.
Yeah, it's not an intellectual perception. It's a willingness to look and see what's real.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Very good. And if at any time you guys have any questions, just type those into the comments box and we will address those. So they'll be a little bit behind. So go ahead and do that if you have any questions at all. And I guess now is a good time to also identify that the Institute of Metaphysical Science sponsors us, and that if you find value in this, we would love if you shared by subscribing, liking and subscribing, a heart, whatever, to this and help us spread the word. So let's see.
You want to use the quote from my book?
Yeah, understanding allows students to discern, I think this is the right one, to discern the characteristics and distinctions integral to the discovery of their own divine nature as the presence or spirit of consciousness.
Yeah.
The God idea, self-reflecting, is the ever new presencing seen as the language of you and me in action. So whatever we're looking at, we're in action. Is that accurate?
Yeah, well, when you're in possession of the facts, you move to action. When you're exploring, there's not too much action going on.
Well, when you're studying or anything like that, is that what you're talking about? Because what would you denote as action?
Yourself. Yeah, there's a difference between, understanding, unless you're just going off of a lot of excess energy, you don't really move into action without any understanding. Understanding is the thing that accesses action, that makes a difference in the world. If you look at the teaching tools, for instance, of 2 and 2 is 4, and all the way through mathematics, that's a good example all the time. But if you follow those rules, there isn't too much action. There's a lot of figuring things out, trying to understand the nature of mathematics. Same thing true with metaphysics. And exploring these ideas But once understanding is, aha, I got it, then you moved into action.
Right.
So there is a distinct quality.
So you could say that understanding is like it's like that insight that we have.
Yeah. Yeah.
That
I got it.
intuitive insight.
It's the light
Oh,
bulb
I
going
see
off.
it. Yeah. And then it's gone. But
That's
it's the thing you see that then leads you in a direction where you then see things you maybe never saw before that become very apparent.
Yeah, and when you really get the experience of understanding, it moves you into action. It's not like, should I do this? It's, I can't not do it.
Right.
Do you know?
Okay. All right, cool. All right. And then in Science and Health, Mary Baker Eddy on page 480, line 19 says, man is not God and God is not man. Spirit constitutes.
Exactly.
And that's the understanding.
Yeah.
What constitutes everything seen, heard, felt, everything. And living consistent with that understanding is what is the evangelist.
Yeah, and then there's this note from, which I took right out of Margaret's writing of the letter to her students, and says, note the meaning of constitutes. Constitutes means to form, to make up, as being the constitutive element. God constitutes man, but man does not constitute anything. Man is reflective presence. The constitutional power is God being. It's being,
Right.
being itself, being you, being me, being all.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And then you say in Mind is the Athlete on page 176, I see what I have to see, since what I believe is what I see.
Yep. So all I have to do is look around me to see what I'm believing.
Right.
And that's hard to remember when you're having difficulties or problems arise.
Right.
That is, in fact, what it's doing. It's feedback saying, hey, wake up.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. Now, until recognition of the actual facts present shifts my perception, that view of perceived facts will persist.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what you resist persists?
Yep.
All right. Yep. What's another way to put that?
Well, almost anything, if I try to get rid of something, anything I give attention to is going to be resisted.
Yeah.
I mean, attention to, like, insisting on it, trying to implement it, trying to push it through, whether anybody wants it or not.
Mm-hmm.
My human effort, if I can put it that way, to convince anybody or to change something or to fix something or to move something or to rearrange something or to hide something or whatever, all of those human actions actually have what's going on persist. Because it can't disappear. See, language by itself disappears.
Yeah.
So when something persists, it's because you've got something going on about it, some energy holding it in place. So you have to look and see, what is it I expect that picture to do?
Yeah.
What is it I expect to happen? And when I look at that and think, you got to give up, you don't know what it should do. You have no idea what will happen.
That's so give up your agenda. Give up all of that you're thinking. Yeah.
When I can leave it alone, absolutely leave the view, my point of view, alone. Oh, that's relevant. Okay. And walk on. Then there's some freedom. Then understanding can dawn.
Yes. And when we have that, when I'm holding so tight to a particular judgment or belief, or, I just am anxious about things or something like that, when I let go of all of that and I get with the facts, all of that disappears.
Right.
and a calm and a peace start to show up in a way, or start to be present. And then I can see room for action. I can see where effective action could be.
Yeah. And the experience of peace, which seems to be intermittent and here a little, there a little, and not very consistent,
Right.
is because your living of the idea is inconsistent and not very, not really very free.
Right.
It's like, yeah, I know I should leave it alone, but,
Right.
or, yeah, it feels a little bit better now today, but.
Because you're still holding on to what you think it should look like. And that's the but.
That's right.
And until you're willing to let go of those buts, you're not really living from understanding.
That's right. Or you're questioning it. Like, how come it looks this way, if that's true?
Right.
Because human beings do not really understand that what they're babbling on about is language. It's their point of view on a reality that is grounded in perfection.
Yeah.
And they can't begin to entertain the perfection present while they're blinded by their language view.
Right.
Which is exactly what human beings do all the time. I do it myself. I know what it looks like.
Yeah.
And it's really a discipline to keep looking and saying, point of view, thank you for sharing, Betty, and let it go. And 2 seconds later, thank you for sharing, Betty, and let it go.
Right.
We can say thank you for sharing, but we don't let it go easily.
Right.
Because we really don't get that.
Right.
Yeah.
So the muscle is the ability to let go.
Yeah.
But not just mouth the perfection is, it's all perfection function. But then really let go of the judgments, of the expectations.
Yep.
And allow things to be exactly the way they are. And that's where the freedom is.
Yep.
Okay. All right. So then on page 9, in a letter to my students, Margaret Laird says, the disappearing of that which is not and the demonstration of truth as the one comprehensive view was prophesied in Ezekiel as overturning.
And go ahead with the note because that follows up on that statement.
This overturning will cease to the degree that mankind gives up the dualism of mind and matter, right and wrong, good, God and man, and lives as the knowledge or understanding of true selfhood.
Yep. You could really read that one again because that was a lot of words.
So the disappearing of that which is not and the demonstration of truth as the one comprehensive view was prophesied in Ezekiel as overturning. This overturning will cease to the degree that mankind gives up the dualism of mind and matter, right and wrong, God and man, and lives as the knowledge or understanding of true selfhood.
Yeah, and that's what we were just talking about, this business of letting go of the language, letting go of the way it looks, letting go of the way you think it ought to be, letting go of your opinion, your judgment, all of that.
Yeah.
That is the overturning and overturning and overturning. And so it looks like you let go that much, and then you have to take another look, and then you let go a little more, and then a little more, etc. That's the overturning until it's gone. And then you say, whoa, why didn't somebody tell me?
Right. Yeah. If only I would have known.
Yeah.
So it's all about letting go of the dualism, letting go of our expectations and all of that stuff. Because all that stuff, the judgments, expectations, resentments, regrets, all that stuff is all just personal stuff.
Yeah, it's the way human sense presents it.
Okay.
The human condition.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, very good. If you have any comments or questions, please put them in the question box, and we will get to those as well. And then in Science and Health on page 509, Mary Baker Eddy wrote, infinite mind creates and governs all, from the mental molecule to infinity. And the divine principle of all expresses science and art throughout his creation and the immortality of man and the universe.
Yep. So then I wrote a comment at the bottom of that. There aren't any limits. There aren't any no-nos in metaphysics. In your daily living, you are the authority, and you are the maker, the shaker, the mover of mountains in your life. You may look around at your language world and think it's over there. He did it, she did it, they did it, the war did it, the pandemic did it, or something similar. But actually, it is who you are being that generates your language world of understanding.
Yeah.
So you have to look to where you're standing and be willing to just leave it alone, leave that view alone,
Mm-hmm.
and just begin to play with perfection present, the one power present, and reflectively constituting all there is to me.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think I was born as this, that, and the other thing, and grew up over there and had parents and brothers and sisters and went to school and all that stuff.
Right.
But there is a being present, grounded in perfection, having me be present, period, calling myself Betty.
Yeah.
But the being that's present is the freedom that I experience when I let go of the beliefs about Betty.
Yeah. Yeah, the beliefs about Betty would tie you into the two-legged animal.
That's right. And that's what gives me my human picture.
Right.
That is just a really distant point of view of a reality grounded in perfection.
Right.
Nothing needing to be fixed, changed, or managed.
Right.
All is infinite mind. That's what metaphysics is all about.
Yeah. Yeah. Very good. And then in your book on page 89, Mind is the Athlete, you wrote, acknowledgement or the understanding of the scientific facts of being is generative and healing. Experience is a reflective act of self-identification.
That's a good sentence, don't you think?
It's an excellent sentence. So unpack it for us.
Experience is the teacher.
Well, sure. And mind is the athlete.
And willingness to allow the picture to be just the way it is and just the way it isn't.
Right.
Accessing your own freedom. That's the root of understanding.
Yeah. Yeah, willingness is key. Yeah. And then you can start to see how willing you are to live science fully.
Yeah, and even when we're the most willing, it's probably that much in the scale of willing.
Right. Right. Because we reserve the right to always have our judgment.
Yeah.
And our preferences and everything else, right? And everything in between from A to Z. Yeah. All right. Is there any questions, any comments, anything at all? Okay. Well, that's all we've got for you today. So we'll see you again next week at the same time, 5 p.m. Central, 5 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Central. And we shall see you then. All right. Have a great week. Check out your understanding and living from understanding and see how it goes.
Yep. Be your own evangelist.